I Wish You Would by J. Wilburn. All right, Pastor Kane Breyer had a long drive ahead of him, but he held no hope he was going to make a bit of difference when he got there. If he turned off Route 9, where the Hayward Golf Club and the surrounding Hayward Plantations neighborhood fit into the long bend of the Sugary River, he could look right across the dark water to the edge of Jack Thatcher's and Fisher Ray's property. As it was, he had to follow Route 9 along the winding river to the bridge miles south. Maybe the two of them will have. Maybe the two of them. Here, I got a tense problem here. Maybe the two of them would have killed each other by the time he got there, and this would all be over. Most folks through the county, from Fuller Beach to Union Neck, pronounce the river's name Sugary, as in with the SH sound, as you'd probably expect. The Hayward side, with their fine homes and long family histories, pronounced it Sugri, rhyming the first syllable with good, near rhyming the first syllable with good, and coming down hard on the last syllable like they were having a fit. Across the river, where folks like Jacks and Fisher owned millions of dollars worth of undeveloped family land and hunting ground, but still wouldn't be invited anywhere nice, they pronounced the river as Sugri, rhyming the first half with jug and barely giving breath to the end of the word like it hardly mattered. The way folks spoke the river's name was a bigger divide than the river itself. If you didn't understand that, you weren't going to ever understand Rutledge County at all. Most people didn't. If the native tribe whose dead language was used to name Sugary River was still around to settle the matter, chances are hold on, let me fix something here. Chances are it still wouldn't make a difference, but they were long gone. Probably Jack Thatcher and Fisher Ray would outlive everyone else in the county too. As Pastor Breyer crossed the bridge in his Honda Ridgeline, he still wasn't halfway there. I think halfway needs to be a compound word. He still wasn't halfway there. The black water was moving with an odd bright green hue today. One of the beaver dams upriver must have broken and drained out one of the marshes. Hold on, I got something to add in, but I may need to do it later in the story here. He wound his way to Eagle Crest Lane, which was a fancy name for a crumbling stretch of asphalt through the woods. Gunshots, that needs to be plural. Gunshots popped off from both sides of the road where hunters used the unused land. I'll say the otherwise unused land. Used the otherwise unused land. As Kane Breyer left the last hints of paving for all the dirt turns, I've lost my place, I'm sorry. As Kane Breyer left the last hints of paving for all the dirt turns and bends, he had to stop three times to move chains or open gates. One time he was in ankle-deep water. Kane had remembered to wear his boots, but his socks still got wet. All right. The ridge line handled the rough path just fine. Let's say one of Pastor Breyer's granddaughters the one who still spoke. Sorry. Where am I? Okay. One of Pastor Breyer's granddaughters, the one who still spoke to him, Ridge, Ridgeline handled the rough path just fine. One of Pastor Breyer's granddaughters, the one who still spoke to him, made fun of him having a truck with a trunk in it. Cain loved the in-bed trunk. It even had a cooler drain in it, but he felt stupid saying it out loud, so he just took the teasing. Alright, that'll work. It wasn't out of the question that he could get shot by any one of the landowners who decided he had come far enough, but he was lucky today. Well, as lucky as he could be going to break up a feud older than the hills. Not that there were many hills in this close to the coast, but that kind of makes the point, doesn't it? He left the sounds of hunters behind and twisted his way down to the river again, close enough to spit on the golf course across it. All right, let's try to keep the geography clear here. He drove past Fisher's Turn and stopped just short of the path leading down to Jax's place. It wasn't quite on the line between their properties, but he was close. Not a safe zone, not neutral ground, and not a safe stretch for him to stroll, but he'd get somebody's attention walking out here, maybe this business would be done faster one way or the other as a result. Cain Breyer stood beside his truck and felt the water squish inside his shoes, his boots. Nothing made for a miserable day like wet socks inside your shoes. He certainly didn't want to die that way. He took a deep breath and let it out. With that, he got into motion. Cain opened his trunk and moved tools one way or the other. Under the usual building and digging implements, he unrolled a pouch of cutting, stabbing, and killing tools. Among them he had crosses older than his grandfather, sharpened stakes, blades of silver, and a few things that had no real names for in English. He took another breath and stared up through the abstract of branches and leaves. Brushes of sky appeared with the high winds and vanished as the trees moved back into place. It wasn't as dark as night, but he wondered if it was dark enough for old vampires to creep about, if they were determined enough. Cain used to keep account of all the bloodsuckers he had dispatched over his many years as a hunter. He'd lost count at one point and simply forgot after being retired long enough. His late wife had been something quite extraordinary in her ordinary job of teaching 32 years. He imagined she forgot old students' names as easily as the names of the ancient creatures he slayed left his mind. Okay, that needs to be a comma, so that his clause is separate from hers. All right, continuing on. He never forgot their hideous faces or their sharp fangs. He had only ever been one slip away from dead or immortal. He remembered the ones who got away. 3 was all that made that list. 3 undead monsters that still crept about the world as far as he knew. His eyes traced the tools as his mind lost itself in the memories. In the end, he rolled the pouch back up without taking anything, and he closed the trunk. He was here to make peace and not add to the violence. As he walked away from his vehicle and slogged through the carpet of leaves, he mumbled to himself, "Sure, let's see how this shit works out." The shouts carried to his ears pretty quickly upon entering the riverside of the woods. They probably carried over the river, and if Cain Breyer couldn't get a handle on things, the law would have to pay a visit, and that wouldn't go well for anyone. Some secrets were kept for a reason. Pastor Cain Breyer, retired vampire hunter, went toward the disturbance instead of away from it. That was an old habit, more dangerous than not keeping secrets. In the past, He had better knees, a stronger heart, and fewer medications to keep track of. But he was one of the few people in on this secret, so it fell to him. Their shapes came into view just as that sick green of the river showed like a ribbon through the reality of the world. They threw their shadowy hands in the air as they cursed one another over a short stretch of wire fence topped with barb. They weren't throwing hands at one another yet, so maybe some ribbon-thin hope remained. Pastor Breyer did his best to be loud as he approached. These were not men you wanted to surprise on a good day with dry feet. They were being too loud for him to be subtle. I gotta put though at the end of that, sorry. Too loud for him to be subtle, though. Sorry to interrupt, fellas, he cried. They both turned on him, and he was just happy they didn't spring. He was still yards away, but with these old cusses, that might not be far enough. Oh, wonderful days, Fisher Ray called from the right side of the fence as Breyer faced it. Your favorite keeper is here to take your side again. Now be fair, Kane said. That's as far as he just got. Jack Thatcher towered a head taller than both the other men on his side of the wire and spewed out a string of curses in 4 different languages at Fisher's implication that Jax needed any keeper. Fisher joined back in the shout with 2 of those languages, one of which, so I need to do was instead of were, one of which was as dead as the one that named the river below. Gentlemen, we know we're going... Okay, this needs to be a contraction. Gentlemen, we know we're going to work this out because neither of you are leaving your land, so that only leaves peace as the ultimate outcome. Let's be clear about the dispute and move on from there, shall we? Take down your fucking fence, Fisher growled. He had at least switched back to modern English, so he must have calmed himself by degrees, no matter... I think that needs to be 2 T's. No matter how his tone came off. I'll take my... Pardon me, I'm sorry. I'll take my fence down once your damn egg-sucking dog dies of natural causes, Jax growled back. He doesn't suck eggs, your mother sucks eggs. Kane braced himself, but found he could still be surprised. Jax laughed, but then turned to sneer. Maybe she did, but she's dead and not bothering my chickens now, so whoever's sucking eggs needs to stay behind a fence. Needs to stay behind the fence. You probably have a snake problem. I do, Fisher, and it's you. They drew closer to one another, glaring over the line of barb at each other. No, I don't need that. I'm kind of repeating myself. Do just glare across the line of barb. Maybe you could tie the dog or pin him, Kane said. The dog doesn't suck eggs. That's an old wives' tale, and I'm not pinning him, old man. You're taking his side again without seeing the truth. Kane Breyer held up his hands and said, I'm not, but if Jax wants your dog off his land, we have to figure out something. Fisher tilted his head. I know which egg-sucking dog I need to be rid of. Jax licked his lips with a tongue that was too long. Kane didn't pick up on the problem right away. Fisher hissed and tilted his head. He said, You're not ready for what your eyes say you plan to do, old dog. You sound scared, Fisher. Maybe you ought to move on, sink under the water, and move back to the Florida with the rest of your primitive kind. Both men shed their shirts. Jax showed his hairy back and chest. Fisher's skin was patchy and scaled. Kane realized too late that it was too late. Still, he tried to back away. He grumbled to himself, God, I miss dealing with vampires. Fisher showed all his teeth in his long mouth, and his words came garbled, but Kane heard him say, You can try to make me, you mangy asshole. I'll run you out like every dirty lizard before you. I wish you would. Jax hunched over as fur covered the rest of his body. His fangs grew in full and saber-like. He would put any old vampire to shame. Fisher extended out until one would think... Hold on, gotta fix another word here. Until one would think he would fall flat like any other alligator. But he wasn't just any other gator. Now he was the tallest combatant. Jax rose to his full height as much as his bent back would allow. The werewolf and weregator stood across from each other. Any hope the partial fence would keep them apart evaporated as they clashed in the air. They twisted on impact and fell mostly on Jax's side of the fence. Fisher's long tail and one of Jax's haunches caught on the barbed wire and wounded them both before they tumbled into the leaves. Dogs barked from... I need to fix something here, sorry. Dogs barked from more than one direction. Kane feared if Fisher's pet showed up, the animal would suffer for getting involved. The pastor ran toward the fight, knowing he was going to suffer. They clawed and bit one another, rolling down the slope with their efforts to injure each other. Kane held his back as he limped down the path they spread through the leaves with their fight. The creatures came up to their back feet swinging. You probably couldn't imagine a wolf and an alligator boxing, but that just means you never saw... how hard were creatures of all types can punch. All right, need to fix a word there. All right. If I wasn't on stream, I'd be fixing all these typos before anyone saw them. Everybody would think I was a genius. The bass drum impacts of each fist into the body of the other echoed through the trees. As their faces contorted in pain and rage, they bit at one another. The wolf latched on to... I'm going to make that a contraction. Not a contraction, a compound word. Onto Fisher's scaly throat. Kane saw blood and didn't know what to do. Fisher snapped his long jaws 3 times in the air before he caught a piece of Jax's pelt on the 4th try. More blood. Jax howled but refused to release his neighbor's throat. Fisher rolled 3 times standing. Then both fighters lost their feet and tumbled down the hill to the water's edge, still locked in each other's jaws. As their feet splashed into the shallows of the green, slow-moving water, Fisher did his best to drag the wolf into the river with him. Jax thrashed and planted all 4 paws to pull the other way. Kane imagined Jax saw going in the river as surrendering his life to Fisher. Jax finally released Fisher's throat, but then clawed at the open wounds. Fisher released his neighbor's pelt and swung his heavy tail, knocking Jax into a tree. Jax fell to his belly and groaned. Fisher sprung, but Jax rolled around behind the tree. They lashed out at one another around the trunk. Pastor Kane Breyer held up his hands and called, "Can we try to talk this out again? It seems to be just a question of what to do with a dog and an unfinished fence." Fisher took hold of Jax in his teeth and claws again. This time he threw his weight sideways, and they did splash into the sugary river, parting... Hold on, I need to fix a typo, sorry. Parting the green swill for the black water, let's say beneath. Beneath. Both creatures disappeared below. Once you change one word, you end up having to change them all. All right. Kane cursed mostly in English and waded out to his knees, no concern for his socks any longer. No. No one came up. This was probably the death of Jax, but then Fisher would have to answer to packs of werewolves who would come from miles for blood and vengeance. There would be no more secrets. There would be no peace. Everyone in Rutledge County would be touched by this violence. Kane Breyer sighed and wondered if he could talk Fisher into leaving and hiding somewhere far away. The pastor noted that the county was no stranger to violence or the supernatural. This river had accepted many deaths over the generations. Both men broke the surface, back in human form and naked. Jax coughed and gagged the most as they dragged themselves onto the bank on both sides of Kane. They fell into the leaves and heaved for breath. The wounds didn't look as deep in their human flesh, but that could be deceiving with their kind. They could take quite a bit of punishment, but they were able to die from all sorts of things despite being immortal in another sense. Pastor Breyer sat down in the mud without a thought for his comfort. You two make up down there or come to your senses?" Fisher let out a long breath and said, "It's full of snakes down there. Must be 10,000 of them." Kane staggered backward away from the water's edge and hit 2 trees with his shoulders before he fell on his ass again further up the slope. Both naked men, with their legs still trailing in the greenish water, laughed. Jax choked up a little more of the river, but then continued laughing with Fisher. "Were you bullshitting me?" Kane asked. "I'm a weregator," Fisher said. "The hell do I care about snakes?" "So why did you stop fighting once you had him under?" Kane asked. "Not that I'm complaining, mind you." Alright, I need a comma there. Alright, we're in the home stretch here. Fisher rose to his knees with much of his skin caked with dark grayed mud. He shrugged and spit out something that looked distinctly like blood. "I don't know. You fight one werewolf and you have to fight them all. I got enough trouble with just this bastard." Jax coughed, spit, and coughed some more. "You're damned right about that. What now?" Fisher sighed and said, "Well, your beer and table or mine. Doesn't matter." Fisher sucked at his teeth and said, "I'll fetch 3 steaks for us. If you'll set out some beer and some sides, we'll talk through it. I don't even mind that your preacher is here to take your side again." Kane opened his mouth to protest, but then stopped himself. A steak and a beer was a far better ending to this than he had expected. The 3 old-timers climbed up the hill with the river to their backs.